Make sure I'm tucked in here. I've heard from someone that I often get up here and I have things hanging out. So I better. I want to thank you all for welcoming me back here. This is the third time that I've been here, and that I've been asked to speak for your special group. And I'm always sort of struck by the presence of you guys in this place. I can always feel it. Sounds like it feels like you've been doing some great work here in this place. I usually like to start with some self-deprecating humor about the fact that I'm a Lutheran, or former Lutheran, who was raised in the Midwest, but sort of an amazing thing happened when I was going to create this talk, which is that I realized I'm like plumb out of self-deprecating humor about that. So for a former recovering Lutheran from the Midwest, I think that's some serious progress. So for those of you who may not have heard me speak or seen me speak, my name is Jay Eaker. I've been a chiropractor, like Katie. Katie did such a great job of talking about it there. I've been a chiropractor for 11 years, and I don't practice the sort of thing that people normally think of when they think of chiropractic. The foundation for what I do is this gentle form of wellness care called Network Spinal Analysis, and I sort of combine that with a lot of mindfulness awareness practices. And so over the years, I've kind of created my own thing. And over the course of the last few years, I've kind of come to understand through the work that I do and through working with people that the key to our healing, our health, our wellness, our awakening has a lot to do with our attention and what we're doing with our attention. And I've learned that through our attention we have access to the creative source that animates everything in the universe, and the creative source from which everything arises. And so some profound healing has taken place in my life in the last couple of years as a result of this awareness. And so I kind of strive to help people in my practice have a direct experience of that in their bodies and in their lives. Another way of saying what I'm doing. And I also like to create write about that and create videos on on these concepts. And so I have a email sign-up list out there. If anyone wants to be on my email list, you'll get notified of when my next article comes out or my next video, or also when I do events like a meditation workshop that's coming up on the 29th that I'm doing. There's also a sign-up sheet for that out there, and I have some cards out there. The cards have a special offer on the back if you want to take a look at that. And also, by being connected to my email list, you'll learn more about what I do and how it is that I might be able to help you. So it sounds like you guys have been exploring the subject of spirituality and creativity. And like I said, something that I think I've discovered is that our attention gives us access to the creative source from which everything in the universe arises. So the ultimate source of creativity and creation. And there's a couple levels of that kind of shows up. Our attention is kind of a conduit, on one level, a conduit for that source. So wherever we direct our attention, whatever we're directing our attention towards, it receives, the object of our attention is receiving the creative force that animates everything in the universe. And on another level, we can use our attention to look back into the source of creation and have a direct experience of that. And when we do that, we sort of entrain to the source, or the source sort of harmonizes us to itself. And there's a different level of creativity that can happen in our bodies and in our lives, different level of healing that can happen when the source is sort of creating directly through us. And so on some level that sounds kind of esoteric and abstract, and it always helps me anyway to sort of relate to these concepts and ideas on more of a science-y level. And so I have a visual aid here, and what I have here is a kind of map of how creation is ordered according to science. So I apologize if you all can't see it, but I'll talk about it too. So we can sort of think of our reality as in relationship to this line that's here. And so on top of this line is our consensual reality, everything that we generally can agree upon, the stuff that we can see and feel. And below that line is the source of creation. And so at the top are our bodies, and what I have there is all the important things. Our bodies, socks, and a chocolate pudding. All the, lots of things that we can agree on, and there's that sort of level. And then what are those, if anyone wants to help me, what are those things made of? Look at that, know what that is. Katie said they're molecules. Yes, so those things are made of, science tells us those things are made of molecules. And then, so there's a molecular level. And then what are molecules made of? Atoms, I think. That's what science kind of tells us anyway. So there's an atomic level. And, but then sort of like, what are atoms made of? Well, we could say protons, neutrons, and electrons in general, and in general, they kind of call that the sort of, those can be called subatomic particles, but, when you get down to the level of the subatomic level, particles don't kind of act like they do in everything above here, and so they've sort of created a whole science, a whole level of physics to help describe that, which is called quantum physics. And quantum physics sort of says that these particles, these subatomic particles, the things that make up atoms, they are not so much particles as they are like probabilities. They're things that are kind of continually blinking in and out of existence. And sometimes they behave in a more fluid fashion. They look like waves. So I have particles and waves there. So where does all that stuff come from? What's the source of all that? And we can sort of see that the source of creation is where all that stuff kind of comes from. So source and its influence kind of flows up through the more subtle levels of reality to the less subtle levels of reality that make the building blocks that make us up. And so among other things are that source kind of comes through us in the form of our attention. And again, it's kind of like our attention is a conduit for source. Then it's kind of like this hose or a pipe, that a source comes through, that flows through. And so again, when we direct our attention at something, the object of our attention receives the creative sustaining power of source. And whatever receives the creative sustaining power of source grows. And that kind of works that way whether we're really aware of it or not. And unfortunately, most people on the planet are probably not so aware of that, how that works. And so their attention ends up kind of like spraying around willy-nilly, in the same way that a pressurized garden hose might spray around like that. It's kind of how I see it. And so, and especially if a lot of people are really locked into watching television, in that case, it's like we get locked into TV and our attention gets directed for us by the media, which of course has its own dangers. And so you can imagine how life might get kind of confusing or complicated if certain things in our life are growing and others are shrinking, and we don't really know why. But once we start to become aware of how this works, we can have some greater level of choice in what we want to grow and what we, in our lives. And we can direct our attention to, having a certain amount of money or having a certain job or being in a certain relationship. And those are pretty cool things. And there's a certain relating to attention and the source in that way. There's a certain level of fulfillment that will bring. But then I think there's another level that happens. And so you've got this sort of conduit of, the source that we can direct. I don't know, what do you guys think would be the next step if after we kind of figured out that I have this like source hose that I can spray on things and make them grow? What do you think would sort of be the next level? Next thing you might do with that? What's that? Yeah, we can direct it, but once we figured out that we can do that, there might be something else interesting. Well, I would say I'd get awfully curious about what's in that hose. I'd want to start like looking down that hose. That's what I would do anyway. And when we look down the sort of conduit, that hose, that pipe, and since our attention is a conduit for source, we're sort of turning source back on itself. And so we kind of create this feedback loop in ourselves where source, is constantly circulating through us, and we're in training to it, and source fills us, and we harmonize to it and infuses into our bodies and our lives. And so there's a whole other level of creativity and creation that happens there when source is kind of directing us. And whatever we create has more source in it, So there's a whole other level of satisfaction and fulfillment that goes along with that. And so the question is, how do we do that? How do we look down this pipe? What is that? Well, our consensual reality there are us and our socks and our chocolate pudding. It kind of comes to us through the world of our senses, through emotions, sensations, thoughts. And so we can use emotions, sensations, and thoughts. We can use our attention to pay attention to emotions, sensations, and thoughts, to look down that pipe. And if we start to pay closer attention to emotions, sensations, and thoughts, what we'll notice is that they arise and they disappear. And that may sound pretty obvious and mundane, but they're arising from the source, and they're disappearing into the source. Oh, and by the way, emotions, sensations, and thoughts are happening at this level right above this line down here. So we're at the level of energy, and so pretty close to source. We have this constant thing that happens in us all the time that's pretty close to source. And if we get good enough at bringing our attention to the fact that emotions, sensations, and thoughts are arising and disappearing into source, and especially if we get good at paying attention to the disappearings, the vanishings, we can eventually get good enough to follow. And every time we pay attention to a vanishing, there's a little piece of us that's being drawn into source with that disappearing thought, emotion, or sensation. And in that way, we can sort of build up a sensitivity to connecting with source. And we can tap into source and have a direct experience of it in our bodies and our lives. There are maybe times in your life where you may have experienced this and may not really have known that that's what's happening. For example, I think my experience sort of tells me, I think this is why it can be so ground shaking when someone close to us passes away. I think because there are parts of us that are so connected to them, and they vanish back into source, and there's a part of us that's getting carried back into source with them. And I've often noticed when someone that's close to me passes away, there's just this stillness, or you can feel how that doorway has been opened, and we were close by when that door got opened. You may have had other experiences, maybe where you were sick, or you were in some accident, or where maybe your life was in danger in some way, in which this line here that separates our normal consensual reality from the source kind of gets kind of thin. When we disappear into sleep every night. We go there into the source. So, but we don't have to wait for life-threatening events, random life-threatening events to just happen to us. We can actually train ourselves to become more aware of this very thing that I'm talking about. And so I thought we would just do a little bit of that right now. And so I'm going to lead just a short little meditation. And so you might want to sort of settle in your seat and close your eyes. And I want you to just notice your jaw and let your jaw relax. You feel the sensation of that relaxation that's happening in your body as your jaw relaxes. Let it spread through your head. Notice your shoulders and how when you breathe in they kind of contract, and when you breathe out they drop, and that maybe there's a sense of relaxation that happens there. Just kind of notice that when your shoulders relax on the exhale. Notice the sensation of relaxation that might occur there. And let that spread into your arms. And notice that when you breathe in, your spine kind of stretches up, and then when you exhale, it sort of relaxes, and there might be a sense of that relaxation through your spine as you do that. Just notice that sensation. And let that wrap around your belly and your chest. And then just notice your legs, your bottom half there, and notice that you probably, if you're sitting, you don't have to hold them up, and there's something nice about that. Just notice that nice sensation of your legs not having to hold you up. So, just let that soak in for a sec. So I want you to now start paying attention to my voice. And I want you to notice as closely as you can when my voice disappears at the end of a sentence. I don't want you to so much listen to the content of what I'm saying, just notice when my voice disappears. In order to help you bring your attention to that vanishing, to my vanishing voice, you can use a label. And so to help sort of point your attention towards this vanishing. And we're going to use the label. I'm going to call that gone. And so, sorry. Brilliant. So in a minute, I'm going to say some words and just have you notice the gones at the end of those words. But I'm going to demonstrate here a little bit. So I'm going to read something sort of inane, and I'm going to demonstrate the gones at the end of the sentences. Mathematicians seek out patterns and formulate new conjectures. Gone. Mathematicians resolve the truth of falsity of conjectures by mathematical proof. Gone. When mathematical structures are good models of real phenomena, gone, then mathematical reasoning can provide insight or predictions about nature. Gone. So that's kind of an example of what I'm talking about. So I'm going to say some things here, and I just want you to notice the gones at the end of what I'm saying, and just kind of say that gone at the end of whenever my voice pauses. I think that the power of any spiritual teacher not so much comes from what they are saying, but it is powerful and impactful to the extent that what they are saying is coming directly from source. To the extent that the words are coming directly from source, the listener becomes connected with source and entrained by source, harmonized to source. This source is the source of all creation. When we are harmonized to the source of all creation, we become part of the action of creation. as opposed to simply one of its creations. When we're entrained by Source, harmonized to Source, inevitably we become compelled to serve Source by allowing it to create through us. And this is creativity in its ultimate sense. Thank you.